Thank you for tuning in today. Just to let you know, today we have a really special guest, Fred. We call him Big Fred. He was a colonel in the United States Marine Corps. And today we're going to be talking about his adventures at war, what's it like, his background. He's a recipient of 3 Bronze Stars and 1 Purple Heart. And we're going to talk about that Purple Heart and see how he achieved that. We also have his daughter next to him, who's going to be the daughter of a veteran of war, to see what her perspective was and see what it was like knowing her dad was at war. So let's start this, and we'll start with saying hello to Fred.
Good morning. Thank you, Frank.
And hello to Catherine.
And hello to Catherine.
Yes, Catherine Fagan.
When you got this power on your right, you get intimidated a little
exactly.
bit. I wasn't trying to forget about you.
He's the real deal.
He's the real deal. This is
all those movies you see.
Right. All the movies we love.
All those Clint Eastwood movies, Hacksaw Ridge and all that. Yeah. He's like the real Clint Eastwood, they make the movies after.
So one of the things, and he also was a swim coach, so I want to talk to him about, later we're going to talk about swim coach. Can you imagine having a drill instructor, a colonel, telling you to swim laps?
Yeah. And then screaming at you, and then jumping in the pool and competing with you.
You will not drown.
Exactly. So throw some more weights on him.
Right. So I guess, we always like to start at the beginning. One of the things I read that I found was really interesting is not only your dedication to our country and to the Marines, but your dedication as a husband. You were married and met your wife at a very young age. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, what was that like, and how'd you meet her?
Well, we went to school together. Mm-hmm. We met when I was in the 8th grade. She was in the 7th. We went all through high school together, started dating when I was in the 11th and she was in the 10th. And even when I was at the Naval Academy and she was at Ole Miss, that relationship endured. And so as soon as we graduated, we got married and never looked back. It was a wonderful, wonderful marriage.
Beautiful. And that was 44 years, huh? Or about?
And when she died, I think it was 53 years we had been married.
53. Yeah. And did you know, so you're in high school, mm-hmm. and you're in love, mm-hmm. and all of a sudden, what did you think? I feel like joining the Marines, or how did that happen?
Well, no, actually, when I finished high school, I thought that I wanted to look and find a better education. I just thought if I went to a normal school, I would be one of many thousands of young people graduating with a degree. I wanted something special. And so the service academies came to mind when I was in my senior year in high school.
How old were you? 17?
How old was I?
Yeah.
18, I guess, when I was a senior. And so one thing led to another, and pretty soon I found myself at the Naval Academy, and it turned out to be all that I could ever have hoped for. And I graduated 4 years later with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, and grew tremendously during those 4 years. I'm sure everyone does in college, but I did especially, and was commissioned in the Marine Corps and went from there.
I have a question. So when you're in the Naval Academy, at what point do you say, I want to go in the Navy or I want to go in the Marines?
Good question, Mark. In my case, it was late in my first class year, in the fall of my first class year, when I made service selection.
That means you're a senior when you're first class.
A senior.
Senior year.
Okay.
Now they do it a year earlier. The midshipmen choose late in their junior year, second class year, about their service selection.
Do they have a choice between the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Army?
No, they do not. There can be.
Tell the story how you decided.
Okay, yeah.
There can be special cases, but generally speaking, Naval Academy graduates can go into either the Marine Corps or the Navy, and the Marines can take 1/6 of the graduating class because we are essentially 1/6 the size of the Navy.
Okay.
Catherine mentioned how I decided to come into the Marine Corps. As a midshipman, I quickly decided that I wanted to be like the guys in green, the Marines,
right,
rather than the guys in blue, the Navy. But I was really turned off by the fact that if I went into the Marine Corps, I'd just throw away my Navy uniforms and have to spend about $1,000 buying Marine Corps uniforms. And coming from a relatively poor background, that was intimidating to me. So over Christmas leave, before I made my service selection, I talked to Effin's father, my future father-in-law, who was really a surrogate father to me. And his advice was, well, Fred, I don't think I'd let $1,000 determine what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. $1,000 is really not that big a deal. You should go where your heart takes you. So that convinced me to go into the Marine Corps, and as I say, never look back.
Fred, I have to say, the Marines have really nice uniforms, and I don't know how I would be able to wear the all-white uniforms and have any kind of a meal without spilling half of it all over myself.
That's always,
you know what I mean?
That's always a concern. You've got to be so careful.
Did you hear that the Navy is just now allowing
I saw that, yeah.
their officers and cadets to put their hands in their pockets?
Yeah.
They were never allowed to put their hands in their pockets.
saw that,
Why,
yeah.
why would they not allow them to put their hands in their pockets?
It's unmilitary.
Yeah.
You don't look very squared away if you're walking
Disrespect.
around with your hands in your pockets. And so the rule in those days was, in fact, I knew people who would sew up the pockets
Right.
on their
Just so
trousers.
they don't make mistakes.
Yeah, you just
Right.
don't make
Exactly.
mistakes. But it may be an antiquated rule. I don't know. It's not that big a deal. You know, the sun's going to come up in the morning one way or the other.
Reminds me of that story about attorneys. It was so cold yesterday. I saw an attorney with his hands in his own pockets.
So,
Oh, goodness.
so going back, you mentioned that he was a surrogate dad. So what was it like? Were you growing up? Where was your dad?
Let's don't get into that.
Yeah.
My growing up days were difficult, and my father was not a good example for children.
Right.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah. May have similar backgrounds. That's why I wanted
Exactly.
to tap into
Yeah.
that. It always, you know, Mark and I went into martial arts and bike, but we had a lot of hidden aggression, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's like,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking like Marines, karate guys, it's like there's a lot of hidden aggression
Oh,
from
yeah.
way deep. Like you don't even want to talk
Every
about
time I look at a belt, I duck.
or anything else in the house.
Exactly.
That get thrown at you.
Well, I have this vision. I know I wasn't there, but of even before the 11th grade, but like the 7th grade when he was the paper boy at my mom's grandmother's house. Is that right, Dad?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he would just drop the paper off in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and she'd wave, "Hey, Fred."
And sometimes I'd get off my bike. That was the last house on my route, oddly enough. And so it was very convenient if I didn't have to go to baseball practice, park my bike on the sidewalk and walk up on the steps and sit down and visit with Effin.
So that says a lot about your character because at a very young age, you were working, correct?
Yes.
You weren't a slacker, even as a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old.
Well, it was out of necessity. I started delivering groceries when I was like in the 4th grade.
10 years old.
Yeah, and so that graduated to delivering papers, and that led to the work at the cleaning, the laundry, and then I went to the tire recap shop while I was a senior in high school and my year of college at Southern Mississippi. So
you went into the Marine Corps with work ethics.
yes, I certainly did.
Right.
Yeah, I wish that a lot of the kids today would have some of those same ethics instead of just spending hours looking at their phone and staying inside their houses eating Cheetos and whatever they
You
do.
make a terrific point, Mark, because that's what attracted me to the Marine Corps. I was accustomed to hard work. I didn't know anything else.
Right.
And the Marines said, don't bother coming to us if you want to read a book or listen to the radio or go to the movie. If you want to be challenged and have to prove yourself, then we'll take you. And so that kind of an attitude attracted me. I was accustomed to it. And so That's why I say.
Are the Marines getting, because of all this wokeness going on, are the Marines getting a little bit softer on how they treat their recruits?
I'm not in a very good position to answer that, Mark, but I don't think so. If I read between the lines in all the publications and stuff, it appears to me that the Marines are maintaining their position of only high school graduates, for example, all high school graduates. And the reason for that is it indicates that a young person can stick to it, and he'll work hard, he or she will work hard to accomplish a goal. Well, that's the kind of guy or gal we want to see in the Marine Corps. So the short answer is I'm not sure, but the longer answer is no, I don't think so.
Colonel, when you graduated, determining you wanted to go into the Marines, at what point did you start hearing about potentially going into a war in Vietnam, and when did that happen?
Well, immediately upon graduation, I went to Quantico for about 6 months' worth of training, as all Marine officers do. And about halfway through that period, this would have been January 65, let's say, there was a lot of talk about what's going on in this place called Vietnam. And we were all getting accustomed to that because it was so new. By the time I graduated in March, I knew that the Marines had landed at Da Nang in Vietnam. Well, I had been assigned to the 1st Marine Brigade in Hawaii. So we thought we were going to go out there and have 3 wonderful years in Hawaii and everything was going to be great. I knew that the brigade had deployed and had already gone to Vietnam. But I didn't tell Eflin that. And in retrospect, that was probably a mistake. Anyway, we get to Hawaii. We fly out there, get to Hawaii, and this lieutenant picks us up in a pickup truck. And she and I are sitting in the back. He's up in the front, and we're driving over to the brigade headquarters. And the lieutenant turns around and says, well, I know y'all are glad to get here, and you're looking forward to enjoying Hawaii, but don't get too accustomed to it because the brigade is gone. He's going to be gone within 2 or 3 days, and you are going to be getting accustomed to Hawaii all by yourself. Well, Eflin just burst into tears, and so that was a traumatic experience for the two of us.
Right, that in the car? They said that?
Yeah, in the car.
That's how they break it to you?
Well, the lieutenant did.
Right.
He didn't have a clue.
Right.
You know, he was just like me. He was brand new, brown bar, and I guess he thought he was pulling a trick on us or something, but Eflin sure didn't think it was a trick.
Right.
But as it turns out, 2 of our other friends were there also. Their wives were there. So the 3 ladies got together, rented a place. The 3 guys took off, and they made it work.
What do you mean took off? You went?
We went to Vietnam.
Okay, where was your...
3 days later?
Well, it wasn't 3 days. In this case, it was 6. But we boarded a ship.
Yeah.
We boarded a ship and took off for
Wait.
Vietnam.
So what month is this? Like
This
you got
would've-
married in June.
We got married in June of '64. This is now April or May of '65.
So you've been married a year, and all of a sudden you're getting deployed.
Right.
And your wife stays back and goes, I thought we were going to stay in Hawaii for 3 years. What did I sign
Right.
up for? When you landed in Vietnam, what happened after that? Were there already combats going on, skirmishes?
Yes, there was. I was assigned initially to 4th Marine Headquarters, to the command post, basically to give me about a 2-week period to become acclimatized because the humidity and the heat was something that we just weren't accustomed to. After that, I was assigned after about 2.5 weeks, where, by the way, our command post was attacked on several occasions. Nothing big, but, bullets flying overhead, all that kind of thing. After that period...
Nothing big, just a bullet.
Yeah.
Hey, give me some coffee.
Yeah, just an AK round flying
Right,
past my
right.
head, no
Well,
big deal.
that's
Right.
I was assigned to 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, and given a rifle platoon, and so I began my combat duty.
So I want to ask you something. When you're there, and you've been through all the training, and I'm sure you did live fire rounds, but what's it really like when an enemy is trying to take your life when as soon as you land, you start hearing bullets whizzing over your head. Does it become real, or are you so accustomed to the training that you just get into the mode?
That's a tough question, Frank, because when it first occurred to me there in the command post, I had no real responsibility except to serve as a watch officer in the CP. So I was mainly concerned about me, old Watash.
Right.
Now, several weeks later, I've got a rifle platoon, and I'm responsible for about 45 young men, their lives. And so when the rounds start flying, I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about them. And how do we deploy or move or maneuver to accomplish the mission that we've been assigned. So now I'm not thinking about me anymore, I'm thinking about the mission and the men, in that order, the mission and the men.
There's a movie called The Band of Brothers. When you get a relationship like that, do these guys become like your best friends, your family, or do you keep it separated to make sure, like, if one of them falls, you don't go into shock or something?
Again, that's a very, very good question. The answer is the leader has to maintain some kind of distance. You can't get emotionally and overly involved with your troops. But on the other hand, when you have shared that kind of danger and those kind of responsibilities and that kind of mission, it tends to bring you together. You get close. You get really, really close. And there's a don't want to call it love exactly because it's not love, but it's a feeling of linked together. We are all in this together, and we've got to pull together if we have any sense of wanting to come through this in one piece.
How did you feel about being married, knowing that you just got married to the woman of your dreams, and you have bullets whizzing? Was there any guilt, like, if I can't die because I'll let my wife down? Did you ever have that?
I never thought about that.
That was out of your head.
I just did not think about. I mean, not to say I didn't think about my wife. I thought about her constantly, particularly in those quiet moments when I'm trying to go to sleep at night.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. But I didn't think when we were in action, Eflin was the last thing on my mind.
And
Yeah.
how long did it take before you're really in action? When you first landed, you're getting a couple bullets. Your sender's getting attacked. Not that big. When did it turn up? Where, okay, we are just combat vets. We're going out. We're doing missions, and this is heated now. There's no more small rounds.
Well, as soon as I took over that rifle platoon, I began to participate in the activities that our company and our battalion participated in. I ran combat patrols. I ran ambush patrols. I coordinated the frontline defenses along our perimeter. So I would say after I arrived in Vietnam, it was probably 2.5, 3 weeks before I actively began participating in daily and nightly combat operations.
At what point did you find out that these guys have an intricate tunnel system? Because I heard that when the Marines would get into jungle warfare and just, even if you drop a napalm to clear, I heard we don't know who to shoot at. And then you figured out there was a tunneling system. And were you there when they discovered that, or was that discovered before you landed?
I believe, this is a guess, but I would say it would be probably midsummer, late summer of '65. In other words, 2 or 3 months after I joined my platoon, that we began to find out that there's a lot of stuff going on underneath our feet that we didn't know about before.
Right.
And we would find these tunnels, and we quickly learned that smoke was one way to
Smoke them out.
Smoke them out. That's right. And the smoke would also come up
From
in
the
their breathing
ventilation
holes,
tubes, right.
the ventilation tubes.
Right.
Then after that, we learned that using tear gas was an even better way, because if there
would
were
stay there.
enemy soldiers, VC, NVA, in those tunnels, they couldn't stand. They could stand the smoke, but they couldn't stand the tear gas. And so it was an evolution. I remember several occasions, maybe 3, where I decided as the lieutenant I needed to go down into tunnels and explore them because I was asking my troops to do it.
Right.
Well, I'm not a small guy,
Right.
and those tunnels were not meant for me. But I did it anyway because I just felt like set the example.
Lead by example.
Lead by example. But I only did it a few times, and it was a very unsettling experience.
So you mentioned that you were in a rifle brigade?
Rifle platoon.
Rifle platoon. So it's my understanding in World War II, they used an M1 carbine.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Vietnam, they changed to an
M16?
M16.
Well, the M14 first, then the M16 later.
But there were some complications or some things going on. Were there challenges with you using that you didn't have the 30-round capability? You only had 16. And they had 30-round AKs that in a firefight. Did they work, or were you like, hey, man, these things are just not working? Because I've heard stories both ways.
Well, that's a complicated question, Mark. First of all, it's not how many rounds you expend. It's those rounds, whether they hit or not. We used to say in the Marine Corps, hits count. The rest of it is horse hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So putting out a lot of rounds, spraying an area, doesn't really do much as a rule. The M14, as I recall, had something like 8 rounds in the magazine.
Right.
Maybe it was 10, which was okay. I mean, it couldn't compete firepower-wise with the AK, but we had a much longer range.
Right.
The M14 was good for at least 500 yards.
Oh, that's
The
good.
problem was, in jungle warfare, you don't need
have
to
500
shoot
yards.
500 yards.
Correct.
You're talking 25, 50 at most.
Right.
And so that's something to consider. To go to the M16, where there were definitely problems with the M16 initially. They later cleaned it up and fixed it. But I was never part of a situation where my troops were killed or wounded because their M16s didn't work. I was lucky maybe.
Good.
But there were occasions, I know, where the M16 malfunctioned and our troops had to pay the price.
Do they have you got an M16 with a 45? Did everyone have sidearms? Or did you just issue an M16?
The officers carried 45 pistols.
Right.
And many would also carry rifles of one sort or another. I remember my gunny Malloy, told me one time, he said, "Skipper, you can carry that damn rifle if you want to, but you're just lugging around an awful lot of weight.
Right.
You ain't being paid to shoot a rifle. You're being paid to use your brain. So let's forget about the rifle. If we get ourselves in a shit sandwich and you need a rifle, right, you'll be able to pick it up.
Right.
There'll be some laying on the ground.
Right.
You use your head,
right,
and leave the shooting to us." That was very good advice.
Mm-hmm. Fred, let me ask you a question. This may be another question you don't want to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You obviously were in combat. Do you remember your first kill?
Yes.
And what did that do? Was it exhilarating? Was it, oh God, this is real? Or was it like, just keep going? Because your mind must have been spinning.
Well, it was. And it was more of a situation, well, that's done.
Right.
Where do we go from here? What's the
right,
next step? We got that guy out of the way. Now
right,
let's go find the rest of them or something.
Right.
Exhilaration was the furthest thing from my mind. I just viewed that guy as an enemy soldier, right, who was trying to do to me what I just did to him.
First, right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It's a mission
accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you saw in the war that they had? Because I know they had their weapons, but did they use booby traps, fire, like what? Everything, right?
No question about
right,
it. Their ingenuity,
right,
their ability to take just about anything and usefully use it in the pursuit of what they were trying to do.
Right.
Booby traps is a very, very good example. Can you imagine finding a 250-pound bomb or a 150 millimeter artillery round that didn't explode when it hit the ground. And so you dig that Hummer up and you convert it into a booby trap.
IED.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Right.
But I can remember seeing sea ration cans. We never thought about this. But if you took a grenade, a U.S. grenade, pulled the pin, and then slipped it down into that sea ration cup, the cup would hold the spoon, so the spoon couldn't fly. And then you would tie a wire or a string onto the head of the grenade, tied across the trail. So somebody comes down that trail, hits the string,
Right.
pulls the grenade out, the spoon flies, and it explodes. Perfect little booby trap. I mean, but gee whiz, their ability.
Right.
They
Ingenuity.
did that, or you guys did that?
They did it. They did that time and time and time again.
At the time you were in combat, from what I understand, they used a lot of mines.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who would step on them, if
Click.
and then
Don't
they
step
would.
off.
But then if they were other soldiers in that vicinity, because there's a certain blast radius, they would.
Have to walk away.
So when
maybe.
somebody would step on one of those, would they warn everybody else and say, "Hey, I just stepped on him," or would
did that
everybody
even
just
happen?
hear it and go, "Duck"?
Well,
that's movie stuff.
That's a tough question, Mark, because what you describe is pretty much the way it would happen. We, in my war, mostly were concerned with bouncing Bettys, which
Right.
were an old World War II type thing. It would pop up and explode about waist high and would just inflict terrible damage on a number of people.
Right.
But I was much more concerned with booby traps and mines. Many of the mines were laid indiscriminately by the French or by the Viet Minh or by the North Vietnamese, and with the passage of time, people would forget where they were, and it didn't have a
Jungle.
Yeah.
Couldn't find them.
And so, as luck would have it, mines were not an overriding concern for me in the way that booby traps were, because we met booby traps all the time.
What about other hazards, such as they call it jungle rot, like your feet get messed up, mosquitoes, leeches, snakes, malaria.
All
Like,
of
did
that.
they give you medication when you went out there? Was there even malaria medication at the time?
There was. Unfortunately, I had both dengue fever on my first tour and malaria on my second tour. I stepped on a punji stake on my first tour.
What's a punji stake?
Punji stake is a sharpened bamboo,
I was going to ask him about bamboo booby trap.
which are placed into a small hole in the ground, maybe 6 or 8 or 10 sharpened bamboo stakes in this bottom of the hole. The hole is covered with a thin bamboo mat, and then dirt placed on top of it on a trail. So the Marines would come down the trail, step on the mat, it would fall through, and the punji stakes would impale your foot. or
Right
your
through
lower
your
leg.
boots?
Right through. Well, see, later we put a steel
flank or whatever
thing
it's called.
on the
A shank.
A
shank, steel shank, and that really did away with the effectiveness of the punji stakes. But early in that first tour, they were a
flimsy
real
bottom.
problem.
So you actually took one in the foot.
Yes,
How far did it go in?
not that far.
Oh,
So did you?
It actually went in just near my ankle. It didn't go into my foot.
Right.
I took it on the side.
and so that gave you dengue fever?
Well, no. Dengue fever, like malaria, was caused by mosquitoes.
Okay.
And we did have, as you asked earlier, we did have medication that we took to prevent that kind of thing. And I religiously took mine. Some people, hardheads that they were, chose not to take the medications. But the malaria pills and the pills that we took to purify water, what was it called?
Yeah.
Can't think of it. Think of the moment. But it was supposed to work, and I think by and large did. Unfortunately, I got sick both times and had to go to the hospital for a short period.
Was there anything in the jungle you could eat that they taught you in your training that, if you ever get stuck or you're running away or you lose your platoon, survival skills? I don't know if you chew on bamboo like a panda bear.
I don't recall that, Frank. I don't recall about anything like that. No.
Okay.
But you learned how to make a good pudding. You had all these recipes of your MREs. And
Well,
all that
yeah,
stuff when there was time.
There was 1,000 different ways to mix up our sea rations to try to make them more enjoyable or at least palatable.
Who was the president that said, how long is it going to take for him to go over there and fight some guys in pajamas? Remember, and he underestimated.
Johnson? Was it
Probably Johnson.
Johnson.
I would think, yeah.
And they were a formidable fight, wasn't it? I mean, these guys didn't seem like to be wimpy battlemen. These guys were into it, or was it?
No, they were fighting for their lives, and they had been fighting for decades.
Right.
I mean, remember, this began after World War II and was still going on when we got there in the mid-'60s. So they may have been farmers. The VC may have been farmers during the day, but at night they turned into fighters, and they knew what the hell they were doing. They could not, the VC, generally speaking, could not muster a large force, but they could put together 30 men and do some damage at whatever they chose to do. I remember in my second tour, we uncovered the 141st NVA Regimental CP deep in the mountains west of Da Nang at Charlie Ridge. And we found an awful lot of stuff that the intelligence people just went nuts over. They came out there in droves to see what they could see in this huge regimental command post. But one of the things that struck me so vividly, they had these hand-drawn maps, sheets of paper like this size, 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, long, and they had detailed drawings of the position that they were going to attack. And they showed the one element coming in this way, another element coming in that way, mortars to be employed as the forces convened. I mean, their planning was just to the nth degree. It really was.
Wow.
So you're walking around in Vietnam and you come across a village. I guess you'd call it a village.
Mm-hmm.
And there's guys out there. I guess there were rice paddies,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
The guy's a farmer. Looks
Mm-hmm.
like just some regular dude. Did you look at that person and go, "Oh, you're not a farmer. You're going to be a farmer until about 8 or 9 o'clock tonight, and then you're going to do some damage." Did that happen?
That happened all the time. It happened all the time. But what you could not afford to do is treat that farmer out there in his rice paddy like an enemy. You couldn't do that. You had to get some kind of evidence that this guy was one of the bad guys, because most of the Vietnamese people, all they wanted to do was farm their little piece of ground, live in peace, raise their children.
Right.
Those who were VC would infiltrate with the normal people and try to hide amongst them. So what we would do is, rather than pick out the males, we would go into the village and then search it out, looking for some kind of evidence that so-and-so was a potential enemy, like finding a rifle, finding military gear, finding
Maps.
maps.
Yeah.
Exactly. Booby trap material. Now we've got something to go on. Mm-hmm. But doing that was a whole lot easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
Right, no kidding.
Did you have a translator with you while you were?
Yes, I did.
And those translators, did any of them ever turn out to be on the other side and turn on you?
Not in my case, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that did not happen, because the South Vietnamese forces were infiltrated by turncoats. I call them turncoats. Yeah. They would prefer to see themselves as
countrymen,
freedom fighters.
Freedom fighters, yeah.
Many of the translators were, in fact, turncoats from the North Vietnamese or the VC. we called them Chew Hoys. And my Chew Hoy, or Kit Carson, was a former North Vietnamese who had Chew Hoyed and come over to our side. And he stayed with me almost my entire second tour as a translator, as an interpreter, as a someone who could make a pretty good guess about what the enemy was trying to do or going to do, etc.
You know what I find very ironic about war? Germany, Japan, Vietnam. These are countries that we bombed severely. Now we go to Japan and hang out in Japan. Germany, we're importing all their cars. Vietnam, you can get a nice bike tour now of Vietnam. When you fight for the country like you did, and then you see people here that you know, not all of them were on the same team. Do you ever think to yourself, this is kind of strange? Like we were at war and now we made peace. Why didn't we just settle this thing a different way? Do you understand what I mean?
Well, it's a very complicated question,
Right.
Mark. But the first part is no. I don't look back and say, I hate that person, or I wish that sorry son of a gun would go back to Vietnam
Right.
and leave us here. It's not an emotional ridden thing like that. He believed in what he was doing. I believed in what I was doing. We went at it. We got it over with, so it's over and done with.
Right.
Put it behind us. Let's go on.
Like a good fight. You know, shake hands and
But
Yeah,
you see
of course.
these wars, these endless wars. And what I found ironic, because Frank and I, during that Vietnam era, I was in sixth grade, probably I was born in 61, so 75, what would that make me?
14?
14?
Yeah.
Or 68, I was 7 or 8 or 9, because I remember watching Walter Cronkite. And every night Walter Cronkite would say, in Vietnam, this many North Vietnamese were killed, and it was always
three soldiers.
and 3 soldiers. But this guy, Walter Cronkite, kept acting like we're getting our asses kicked all the time. But from other vets that I've talked to, they tell me we were doing pretty good. So what's the truth here?
Well, again, truth is in the
Complicated.
eye of the beholder, first of all. In my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many who were involved, we won almost every single battle. And Tet 68 is a very good example. We kicked their ass up one side and down the other. But that's not the way it was perceived in the United States. It was a distinct victory for the other side. And again, truth is in the eye of the beholder. I don't know Cronkite's motivations, but certainly he was a voice that the American people respected greatly, and his opinion mattered. But again, I will go to my grave believing that we, in essence, defeated the Vietnamese on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
We did not defeat them in the area of public opinion.
Right.
And that's what, in the end, made the difference.
The Tet Offensive.
Yeah, go ahead, because I
Okay,
was
the
going to
Tet
talk about
Offensive,
that.
that was the New Year, so everyone laid down their arms thinking that they would celebrate their New Year's.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
We're not going to have any battle. We can kick back. And then, were you there? So
No,
Okay.
I was there the next year when there was another offensive, but
Okay.
not to the degree that the 68 one was.
Right. So that probably woke up everyone saying, we're not going to put our guns down anymore,
Well,
New Year's or not.
That is a point that many people fail to realize, that the deal was on both sides,
Right.
the South Vietnamese and the Americans and the North Vietnamese, okay, we're going to lay them down for this 6-day period.
Right.
Soldiers can go home on leave, see their families,
Right.
and we'll start fighting again in next week. Well, it didn't happen that way.
No.
So you're a recipient of 2 Bronze Stars, correct?
3.
3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. So you don't get 3 Bronze Stars for one thing. It has to be 3 different things. They don't just go, you get 3.
Well, how do you get a bronze star? Star.
That's my question. Can you talk about how you got these 3 Bronze Stars?
What's the definition of getting a bronze versus purple?
I don't think there's a Purple Heart is where you get wounded
Yeah, you
or
get
shed your blood
right,
in defense
combat.
of your country in combat. The awards for valor are there's no criteria to my knowledge. What happens is an individual does something in combat. His peers or his superiors feel like that's worthy of recognition.
Right.
And so the action is written up and submitted up the chain, and then there are boards or there are institutions in the system that will review that documentation and say, okay, this is worthy of a Silver Star or
Gotcha.
a Navy Cross or whatever. And the decision is made way up the line so that there is some means of continuity, I guess
Right.
is the word I'm looking for.
But you got 3 of them.
Yes.
So
Okay, so it goes up the chain of command. They go, hey, this Fred guy, look at this guy's story. What would one of those stories be?
Well, it would.
What'd you get him for?
You get it for doing more than would normally be expected.
So it's not just like one thing. You went there and saved 20 people and came out. This is more like in general. Hey, these guys pushed further. They did more than we expected.
I would say it's hard to categorize, Frank,
Okay.
exactly. But more often than not, those combat valor awards are awarded for a specific single incident. Now, there may be times like Jay Vargas and General Richardson, who were involved over a 3-day period in Dido, a terrible battle, where they performed heroic actions several times over a period of 3 days. And so their award citation reflects that. But generally speaking, the award citation is concerned about one specific incident where an individual might do more than one thing, but it was involved a single occurrence of battle.
So the Purple Heart, we talked about it, shedding blood for there, and you received it. So what happened there? Did you shed some blood?
Well, yeah, I was hit by fragments on more than one occasion. I didn't think that they were
fragments of what?
grenades
Grenades?
and mortar shells.
So you had to be close.
Oh, yeah.
If someo's throwing a grenade at you,
you gotta wake up
you're right there.
Right. Well, then throwing
30
a,
foot.
Been throwing a rock.
radius.
Yeah.
Right, like throwing a big rock.
No
yeah.
fun.
So you see the enemy.
No
How
fun.
weird. You see a guy. Do you watch him throw it, or do you know he threw it? Or
Well, in my case, it was at night, so we knew they were close. We were
Real
trying
close.
to constrict our perimeter and keep them out of the perimeter, but we were throwing, they were throwing. I mean, it gets pretty doggone chaotic, particularly at night when you can't see anything.
Right.
And
So
Vietnam, I swear, Vietnam can be the blackest place you've ever seen in this whole wide world.
do they tell you like don't smoke any cigarettes tonight?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Not only that, they can. Are the Vietnamese can smell? You know, smell
Well,
the Americans,
that,
right?
that there you can appreciate the rumors that would fly around, but the idea was don't smoke.
Right.
And when we would come off an operation, it never ceased to amaze me how all of us in those days I smoked. I mean, I practically ate them for crying out
Right.
loud. But everybody was eager to get that first smoke.
So they had obviously snipers in trees.
Yes.
What did you use for uniforms in order for them not to take out the top guy? Did you all dress the same, or
About the only concession I made was I did not wear my rank insignia on my lapels.
right?
But it's still that was that was like peeing in the wind, for goodness sake, because
They
I
wouldn't-
always had my radio operator right there with me, and he had the radio on his back and either a tape antenna or a whip which made him stand out
Right,
like
exactly.
a green thumb, you know.
Yeah.
And the guy closest to the radio
Is
operator
it
was,
good?
by definition, the leader. And so, but that was, that was just the price you paid. I mean, you had to live with that. You had to have that radio.
Right.
This question I've asked to other Vietnam vets because we've talked to other vets. Are you able to watch movies about Vietnam?
or probably
I
able to
usually-
enjoy.
Like
Not
let's
with
say
me.
Platoon or Full Metal Jacket or whatever that one movie is.
I saw each of them one time, and I have no desire whatsoever to go back and see them again. It's probably worse now than it was when I was younger. When I was younger and full of piss and vinegar, I didn't think about those kind of things. Now, I just don't want to go back. I mean, Platoon in particular was so realistic. I just don't want to see it anymore.
Right.
Right. So that one scene where a guy fell asleep, like I'm sure you're just exhausted. You're standing post,
You're exactly right.
like you're just like because we fall asleep. You're trying to stay up, and then but you don't know you fell asleep
Right.
because you
Sleep
fell asleep.
deprivation is the worst.
Did those kind of things happen where people would screw up a bit and then cost the
No
lives of a
question.
lot of people?
Well, I don't know about costing the lives of many people, but when you fight your way through that thick jungle all day long,
Right.
and then you're in a foxhole with 2, 3, or 4 other guys, and you split up the night into watches,
Right.
it just doesn't take an awful lot to imagine somebody just giving in to exhaustion, and it happened all the time, no matter how you tried to combat it. In other words, instead of having just 2-man foxholes, if you had 4-man foxholes, then each guy had to stand a shorter watch,
Right.
and therefore only stay awake for a shorter period of time.
Right.
And that helped, but it didn't solve the problem.
Did
Well,
you have
you-
claymores?
Beg your pardon?
Did you use the claymores?
Oh, yes, very definitely.
Like every night you'd set a perimeter?
Not necessarily, because so often you got to be as concerned about the back blast of that
Right.
baby just as much
Yeah.
as you do
Right.
the forward end of it. So if you were set up in a flat terrain area, you might not have a good opportunity to use the claymores.
Right.
But boy, those babies were terrible. I mean, they were something, especially if you were setting an ambush and on a trail. And you were a little bit higher, so you had some protection from that
Right.
back blast.
So in Vietnam, when you're really tired, you have sleep deprivation. Did the military give you any amphetamines that you could take?
No,
Was there a lot of drug usage going on because of whether it's marijuana or opium amongst the? I'm probably sure it was amongst the people because they had it there, but I mean amongst
The
U.S.
troops.
soldiers, were they doing drugs like you see in some of these?
I heard
People-
I heard so much about that, particularly in my second tour. I found one time a box of Marlboros. You know the box Marlboros? that
Yeah,
were
red
sold?
box. Yeah.
And just I found it lying on a hilltop where my company was, and so I reached down, picked it up, opened it up, and there were the rows of marijuana cigarettes, except in the middle there were the rows of regular store-bought cigarettes, except in the middle there were 6 marijuana cigarettes placed in that box. And I thought, how did that happen? How did somebody, first of all, get their hands on this box of Marlboro cigarettes, and then manage to get 6 marijuana cigarettes right in the middle of the pack? I never solved that question.
Yeah.
But you're right. There was a terrible drug problem in Vietnam. And I'm sure there was some usage in my company as well. But I think it was minimal. And the reason is, and I preach this constantly, you can't afford to be a combat Marine and not have all of your facilities present for duty.
Right.
It's just like being drunk. Would you go on a patrol drunk?
No.
Of course you wouldn't.
No.
Would you go on a patrol crazy from drugs? you sure as hell better not, because you may be endangering my life,
Right.
not only your own, but
Right.
mine and everybody else as well. And I think that was pretty effective.
Did you have a good reputation of putting the law down with your
Yes.
troops?
I was known as a by the book guy,
Right.
and I was demanding. I was very, very demanding. My thought was, they don't have to love me. They don't even have to like me, but they damn well sure better respect me if I am going to expect to get them to do what I want them to do.
Right.
Because they're putting their ass on the line. When they do what I say, they're
doing
putting
it.
themselves
Right.
on the line. And they better know that I got my stuff in one bag.
Right.
I was fortunate in that regard, Frank, because I was on my second tour, and everybody knew it. I had taught lieutenants at the basic school for 2 solid years about exactly what we were doing. In fact, in the course of my time as a company commander, I had 9 lieutenants who cycled through my company
Wow.
that I had taught at the basic school. So they knew me.
Right.
And I had my shit wired. I really did. And the troops knew it. They knew that I had their welfare at heart, that I was not some marionette who said, oh, the rules say this and therefore we're going to do this. I was more inclined to say, well, this is what the rule book says, but in this situation, I'm going to allow preference to the welfare of the men and give them a break so they can rest and get over that sleep deprivation, or clean their weapons so they'll be ready to fire tonight, or whatever. They just knew that. And
Dad, I'm learning so much as I'm listening to you as your own daughter, still learning all the details. But wait, you went for your first tour, and then you were back, and you went back to Quantico, right?
right,
Mom came back from Hawaii by herself?
by herself.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, so she went to Quantico without you?
No, well, when I came back from that first tour, I went to Hattiesburg for leave.
Okay, and that's where she was.
That's where she was.
Got it.
And
then
then
y'all moved to Quantico,
Quantico,
Virginia.
right.
So you were at TBS in between your first and second tour
Exactly,
in Vietnam.
exactly.
For like a year?
2 years.
2 years.
Did
2
you
years
know that?
almost to the day.
Did you know you were going to go back on a second tour?
Yeah.
I did.
Did you want to?
No, I didn't particularly
Right.
want to. I'll tell you an interesting story.
Yeah.
I got my orders, and of course, Eflin and I dealt with that. But then when I went to Pendleton en route to Vietnam, my orders got changed, sending me instead of sending me to the 1st Marine Division in country, I was told to go to Okinawa. Well, I didn't like that. And so I called FMF PAC in Hawaii and got the major that cut my orders and asked him to change it, send me back to Vietnam. He said, no, I've already made the decision, you're going. I said, okay. So that night, I called my good friend Buzz Buse, the best friend I had in the world. And I said, Buzz, I know you wouldn't do this for you, but I'm asking you to do it for me. Would you call your dad and ask him to get my orders changed back to Vietnam?
So
His dad was CGFMF PAC,
Okay.
Lieutenant General H.W. Buse. He said, you're right. I wouldn't do it for me, but I will for you. And so he called his dad that night, and 2 days later, my orders were changed.
wow.
But I didn't do that out of
Yeah, like
whatever.
respect
But, you
for-
know, I did it because I knew there was not another Marine captain in the Marine Corps that was better qualified than I was
right.
to go to Vietnam and lead troops in combat.
Yeah.
I believe that just so very strongly.
Hoorah, Dad.
Good. So
When you
so I got a question. This is you came back from Vietnam and you adjusted to civilian life and you did well. Yet there's so many that you see these Vietnam vets, they're homeless, they can't get their act together, they
PTSD?
drinking, PTSD. They don't
Drug
even have
addiction.
I don't even think they had that designation back
No, they
then.
did.
But
They
it
used to
was
just
a
call it
thing.
different. They used to call it shell shock.
Combat
Shell
fatigue.
shock,
Yeah,
contact
combat
fatigue,
fatigue.
correct.
So now it's
So
called
why is it that
Some can handle, some can't.
Yes. Why can some people come back and then some people just fell apart? Is it because they saw different? Because everybody probably sees pretty much the same.
You're right about that. Everybody sees different things. I don't have an answer, Mark. I don't know. I wish I did.
Right.
If we had an answer, we could solve the problem.
Right.
But it just breaks my heart
Right.
to see these guys that just haven't, for whatever reason, haven't been able to handle it, and their lives are in shatters because of it. But I certainly don't know the answer. I suspect drugs are at the bottom of it, but I don't know that, and probably it's not fair to say that everybody drugs apply. I mean,
Right.
more,
Well, the
there's
bottom
more
line,
to it than that.
The bottom line is people take drugs on different levels, whether it's Excedrin or if it's heroin, to do one thing, and that's to relieve pain. The pain can be psychological, emotional, and when you're hurting that hard inside, when you're in a foxhole with your friend and you see him get shot in the head, I'd smoke a joint. You know, like you would consider, like, I'm done, I'm next. What's life? My best friend his head blew up in front of me. I would think that would be a good reason to maybe
Numb yourself.
from the pain. It's all from pain. But then what happens when you take these opioids or heroin, the body gets addicted
more,
and
yeah.
you need more. You know, so I do believe that some of these guys are just normal guys. I can just picture a guy like Home Depot, and all of a sudden he's 17 years old, jumps off a helicopter, makes it through the first 15 seconds of not getting killed, runs into a jungle, and now he's in combat. How scary is that, especially at night? These are nightmares, you know, like so dark you can't even light a cigarette because some dude's going to snipe you.
Well, you can't even get
Imagine-
through the jungle. I
You
mean,
can't get-
it's
right.
like we've been
It's a
in
jungle.
We've been in jungles.
Yeah.
You walk
Yeah.
in and you're like,
You
Where
can't
am I
see
going?
anything.
like,
yeah.
where do I go from here? Well, start cutting shit. I'm like, what do you? Am I right? You have to cut the stuff.
You
You're
can't
like,
see anything.
Yeah,
You're
it's like
surrounded
by bushes.
Yeah,
But
right.
also the enemy has they didn't wear ghillie suits, but they had camouflage on their helmet. They look like part of the bush, and you're constantly thinking, I'm either going to hit a tripwire, I'm going to get shot by a sniper, some guy's going to jump out from 3 feet away and stab me or shoot me. I can see why. I can see why some people would
this is
take drugs.
Frank, listen, Fred, I want to ask you this question. We had a Vietnam vet in here, and his job was to call napalm strikes. He would cruise the area in a fixed wing first, check it out, and then it was a J. I forget what the designation was, but he had a certain designation. Did you in your platoon? Did you have to call napalm strikes, and then were you exposed to Agent Orange also? Like, was all that stuff, because it kind of all goes together.
Let's don't forget, Mark, that question. Let's go back to
Taking drugs for being stressed out.
the North Vietnamese and the VC in the jungle.
Right.
Let's don't forget, we're fighting on their territory.
They know it
They
inside
have
out.
lived there
Right.
their entire
Right.
lives.
Exactly.
And that's one of the
Advantage.
major problems about Vietnam and about the Middle East, for that matter. We, a bunch of Caucasians and black guys, are being sent into an environment where we are foreign to the culture.
Right.
We are foreign to what goes on in that location. Right. And so it's an awfully big jump to adapt and become effective and understand what's going on
In a short amount of time.
in a very short amount of time. Now, to go back, Mark, to what the points you brought up about
We heard all these things about if you're exposed to Agent Orange,
Yeah.
call this number.
Napalm.
And then also, you call an airstrike. Well, what if you're off by 50
Right.
yards?
Yeah.
Like, you could
Well,
screw your own guys up.
100
well, that's right. But excellent point. The thing is, when you use particularly napalm, because it can spread over a large area, you want to bring and yes, I called in napalm, snakes and nape, all kinds of ordnance, hundreds of times. But you want to make sure, particularly using napalm, you bring it across your front. You don't bring it from front to rear
right.
or
Gotcha.
from rear to front.
Doesn't make sense.
You want to
Right.
lay it
Cut
down
the
in
line.
front of you.
Right.
So that when it spreads, it's spreading parallel to where the essence of the bulk of your troops are.
And that starts a new front line almost.
Well, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, because when you're going at 400 knots and you're trying to drop something on a dime down there below,
Exactly.
it's exceedingly difficult. Now, we didn't have smart bombs in those days.
Right.
Now they can
pinpoint.
put it into the mailbox if they want to, or at least that's what the government guys would
That's
like
what
to
they
have
say.
you believe.
Right. That's the arm dealers want you to believe. Buy 3 of them.
But yes, I called in napalm, all kinds of ordnance.
So napalm, just so our viewers, because we have a lot of viewers that don't know what napalm is, explain what that is, just for
It's
the viewers.
jellied gasoline.
Okay.
Oh.
It's gasoline combined with a jelly-like substance to hold it together, and then in the container there is a small explosive charge that will set it off. So when you drop that napalm container and it hits the ground, the explosive charge goes off, igniting the jellied gasoline, and that jellied gasoline will spread, probably 100 yards, 110 yards in a line with about 30, 40 yards to the side.
Right.
And it cooks everything that's in there, in that frame.
Fred,
And what? Wait, hold on, because we're going on chemicals. What was Agent Orange? You keep hearing like Agent Orange.
Agent
what was
Orange
that?
was a terrible defoliant, which was generally dispensed from airplanes. Big old cargo airplanes had these spray nozzles along the wings, and they flew low and slow in formation.
Crop dusters.
Crop dusters, a good example. Dispensing that Agent Orange, which would kill the growth. And yes, I was exposed to it. That's why have got prostate cancer today, and I'm on what do they call it, partial disability from the Veterans Administration because of my exposure. I wasn't involved with spraying or putting the packages together. I went in the jungle where it had been sprayed.
yeah, it's on you.
Yes.
It's like running through that defoliant that you spray on your yard. I'm not going to mention any brand names but you spray it on your grass. Can you imagine spraying that on yourself?
Right.
So one question I had is the helicopter pilots in Vietnam, from what I've been told, didn't have a very long life expectancy, especially in the combat areas. Did you ever have a situation where you were like, we need a helicopter pilot here right now because we got some people we got to evacuate?
I'll tell you, they are, to my way of thinking, they're genuine heroes. I mean, gosh, those things flew so slow and so low, they were sitting ducks. They were sitting in that little plastic enclosed cockpit. They were sitting ducks. But man, they had cojones. I mean to tell you, they really did.
And he had that red cross on the side, and people would say that would just be a target to shoot at. Or did they leave the red cross?
I don't remember red crosses.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember a single one.
I heard there was red crosses. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think
Different-
maybe they had them in Korea.
Well, it could be they had red
the Red
crosses
Cross trucks.
on the birds that flew out to the hospital ship or something. Or maybe they flew from the hospital at Da Nang down to Benoit or something. I don't know, but the helicopters I saw didn't have red crosses.
So some of the people that – sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I was just going to say, one of the tactics I think the Vietnamese use, I wanted to get your confirmation on this, was it's better to have one soldier injured, like maybe a mine that would blow up his foot, so 2 people would have to carry him, because that way you're taking out 3 at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see them doing stuff like that? Instead of just killing the person, they would just injure him. That'd take out 3 Marines instead of 1.
Well, I don't know that I saw that in the sense that I could say that's what they're doing.
Right.
But certainly in reading the literature and being able to look back and see events in a little bit of a different perspective now than I did then, it seemed pretty clear that their extensive use of booby traps was designed with precisely that in mind.
Right.
Injure a few of them and disable a bunch to take care of them.
And then bring in a helicopter to pick them up, then you got a good, nice target. Right.
Exactly.
Some of the
Exactly
people
right.
that weren't really that acknowledged in the Vietnam War were the nurses. So can you tell me about since you were injured, what's your experience with the women? Well, there's male nurses now, but I'm going to suspect that most of them were women. How were they?
As opposed to corpsmen?
I'm not talking
The
about.
nurses.
I'm not talking about in the field.
Okay.
I'm saying when you went to when you were injured, and then Vietnam, there were nurses in Vietnam.
Yes.
How were they looked upon, and how much did they contribute, and what? Because they probably need a little shout out.
Well, to my thinking, they were angels. They really
Right.
were. I never had any personal contact with them because when I was evacuated, it was always to either Charlie Med or Delta Med in Chu Lai or in Da Nang. That's as far as I went. My injuries weren't that extensive. The nurses, I think, were in the major centers like Bien Hoa or on the hospital ship or in Japan or in Okinawa. They were certainly in country, but not at the hospitalization that I went to. So I never saw a female nurse.
What about the MASH units? How close were they set up to the combat zone? Were they pretty easy to set up, or were they?
Or did
way
they
off?
have any? Did they have
Well,
any?
MASH,
Mobile Army Surgical Hospitals.
Right, but I know they had them in Korean War. Did you have any MASH units back
I
then?
don't know.
Yes.
Again, they may have been an Army specific unit.
Right.
They may
Okay,
have
gotcha.
been part of the big outfits like Bien Hoa. But Da Nang, Chu Lai, Quang Tri, I don't think we had any MASH units. I don't think. I'm not sure.
So the Marines were the opposite of what you call in the rear with the gear. You were at the forefront. So
Yes.
no wonder you didn't see any of that. I mean, you were the spear of the head. So you and your platoon had to go into villages and combat areas that no one else has got there first. Were you the first people to push that forward, or how would you determine when you went in?
You see, it's not like World War II where the war was a moving front.
Mm-hmm.
In Vietnam, you revisited the same places over and over again.
What was that? What was that mountain they kept going? Hamburger
Mountain?
Was it Hamburger Hill?
Hamburger Hill.
Yeah.
Again, that was the debacle.
Right.
It really was. And see, they gave it up
Right.
after all
That's what I said.
that.
Kind of like Afghanistan.
Yeah, gave
Which
it
is-
up, and
Okay.
it's just a tragedy.
So after you got out of the war, all this, you're back in you're back in your civilian life. What did you do after that? The reason why I'm speeding it up because I do want to talk about your 75 miles that you are on bicycles and walking that you journaled. So we're going to go pretty fast now. I did want to cover that part of your work because everyone like me who meets a person like you is awe-inspired, but we're scared to ask you because you hear these Vietnam. Don't talk about Vietnam. No one talks about that. That's why I wanted to hit it for that section.
Well, you flatter me, Frank, and I thank you. I appreciate it. It started, I think, in 73 when I began running marathons. And in those days, it was a question of keeping track of the mileage. You wanted to get 110 to 120 miles a week to prepare for that very stressful 26-miler that
Right.
you knew you were preparing for. And I just got in the habit of writing it down, and over the years I've continued. And I must say, Catherine was a little mistaken when I checked my log when I got back. It's not 75,000; it's 70,180.
Okay.
Close
so
enough.
Jacob-
Yeah.
And so now
Close
you
enough.
have, and how many children did you have?
Two,
Two. So Catherine and
Fred, our son.
Fred. Okay, so Fred Jr.
Fred third, actually.
And what was it like? I'm going to switch it over because the reason why I invited her to this podcast because I would be so intimidated. I mean, how did you ever date a guy when your dad was a Marine who they write books about him?
Yeah.
What was that like? In fact,
Rifles by the front door. Just a little reminder, but friendly. We
Right,
were
right.
always called the Smiling Fagans. Everybody loved Big Fred, and
Okay.
my girlfriends just adored him. But yeah, it was intimidating. Keep
Well-
in mind, we moved a lot. So when I was in high school, we got to be 2 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was great for me. And yeah, we had friends come over, and I dated, but one time I stepped out of line. I remember the one time, and I remember coming home and the crossed arms by the front door, the wide
no.
stance,
Right.
and I
You just knew you were
really
in
didn't.
trouble.
I didn't. I was pretty good. I was a pretty good girl. At least I
agree.
think
I agree.
But one time, I got pulled in by my friends to sneak out or something, or I was out later than I was supposed to be. But the discipline, the way I was raised, it is who I am today, and I love the way I was raised because not the love, but also the discipline helps you be an adult.
You know what I
And
love about this?
You are a real estate agent.
I am.
And I've seen your show, and I've seen
I don't have a show.
The thing is, I've seen your work ethic.
Thank you.
And you do not stop. I think you work for the Mercer Group. I want to do a shout out for you because it's highly. If you want a good agent, I'm going to tell you, and I'm a broker, okay? So she'd be considered like competition, but I'm telling you that she is an awesome agent, and if you follow her, you will learn just how good she is. And that work ethic, I think you got part of the DNA from your father because you don't stop working.
Yeah.
Every
Well,
time.
how do we get in touch with her?
So
Work hard, play hard.
How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, my Instagram is Fagan Cat,
Fagan Cat.
and
Okay.
Want to spell it?
FAGANCAT, and then I'm on all the other ones, the LinkedIn and the Facebook and the
And you work for the
YouTube.
Mercer Group?
Yep, I'm with Keller Williams, and then Patrick Mercer. We have a Mercer Group on Adams Avenue in Kensington.
And Patrick is and I've worked with Patrick.
Right, he's a good guy.
Yeah,
Good
super
peeps.
high professional. That guy is
Sharp cookie.
Sharp
Yep.
cookie.
What's your phone number in case anybody wants to give you a call?
Yeah, do a shout out.
Mark. It's 619-806-2284.
One more
and
time.
For your
One more time.
convenience,
Yeah, let's
it
do it.
spells cat. CATH spells calf. Did you know that? So 619-806-2284.
And I want to do that because we can vouch for your work ethics,
Yes.
and you do
Thank
take after
you.
your father.
I appreciate that.
And
27 years I've been almost 28 in.
Oh boy!
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, one of the
listen-
nicest things about this interview
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
What's
is the
Father,
love between
daughter.
the father
Right.
and daughter. Because I have I have
Me
two
too.
daughters. Frank has two daughters.
We do.
And when you see this, it's
go
just
way back.
it's beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
special.
the
It is
it is
special.
special. The bond between a father
Right.
and the daughter, very good.
And we've all been at certain events where I see you guys together, and you bring your father, and I see how tight you are, and you get to joke with him, and he loves you.
we're friends.
And it inspires me with my connection with my girls, and I
It
look
changes.
up to it.
It wasn't always, I wasn't intimidated in a nice way, but I always have respected both my parents. I called them ma'am and sir all my life. It's just the way I was raised. But now, and we're friends, but I still always respect.
Of course.
Yeah, you have to.
That's what he said. You don't have to love them, and you don't have to do
Right,
this, but you
but I
got to
do.
respect
I
them,
do.
but you do love them, and that's John.
And Fred, have you wrote anything anyone can read? Is there something out there yet? Are you working on something? Because I think
should.
listen, I wanted to do this interview to historically put this because you are an American hero. I'm
flattered, Frank, that you would say that.
Well,
But you are.
You
really are.
You took kids into battle, and I know you take a bullet for any of them, and especially your second tour when you got a little emotional because now you're going. I'm not only responsible; I am the lead, and these kids are my responsibility. And that you would do everything, and I'm not going to compare myself with you, but I've been in situations where, as a sergeant, I had to perform first. If we're going to jump out of a helicopter, I'll go and then have them catch up. So they know I'll do anything I ask them to do. But in war, when you're asking them to potentially take a round and you're going in there first, especially the fact that you about 6 foot, 6'4"?
6'4".
You're 6'4" going into a tunnel designed for a 5 foot, 120 pound, man, and you're going down there 3 times. Shows me right now what kind of a leader you are, and I have even a higher demand and respect for you, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Frank.
And I think that's going to wrap it up for now.
Catherine is got to go.
Yeah.
Gotta go show some property.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, we could have went on for
for
another.
hours.
We could have went on for another 2
You
hours.
see what I mean? We have to stop the interview because she has to
Right.
go work.
Okay.
There's a
All
work
right.
ethic
So
right
Frank,
there.
tell them what we're going to do now.
Well, I'd like you to click and subscribe and come to our channel. And
Yeah, is this on YouTube also, by the way?
it's on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Okay. I'm getting on YouTube.
Yeah, just the number 2, let you know, because what we do is we talk about all sorts of things.
Wait, it's called Just To Let You Know?
Yeah, just
With
to
the
let you
2.
know.
Just to let you
Okay.
know, we're going to talk about this.
I like that.
yeah, just to let you know.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna
did you want to
I'm
say
gonna
something else?
subscribe you if you subscribe me.
Oh,
So I have a
absolutely. We'll go
YouTube
back
channel
and
too
forth.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So you
100%.
can hear us on all the various podcast platforms. We're on Spotify, YouTube, all of them. So you can listen to us when you're driving. And this is an especially intriguing show because I agree with Frank, Fred. You are definitely a hero. You may not think you're a hero,
And that makes him more of a hero.
and that exactly
right.
because you
Very
just
humble.
said I
Right.
did what I had to do,
Right.
and that puts you in a completely different category.
Okay, thank you
All right.
so much.
Thank you
Thanks for
both.
Thank
having
you,
us.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. Just to let you know, with the Powell brothers.